All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're taking a look at a really fascinating multi-layer journey. We are going to map out the entire life cycle of a modern creator and entrepreneur. We're starting from literally the very first second, that split moment where you either capture a distracted listener's attention or lose them forever. And then we're zooming all the way out to the exact opposite end of the spectrum, surviving those grueling, totally unfiltered leadership nightmares that pop up when you actually build a real business around your content. It is a wild ride, so let's just dive right in. Think about this for a second. What if the next 10 seconds literally decided your success? Sounds crazy, right? But according to Pat Flynn's analysis of our digital world, they absolutely do. We're living in an era of just unprecedented digital distraction. Pat notes that the average online attention span is a mere 6 seconds. 6 seconds. Before your audience even registers what you're trying to say, their brain is already making a split-second decision: stay or scroll. Your opening hook is the ultimate gatekeeper here. It literally makes or breaks your entire reach. So how do we win those critical first seconds? Well, we have to lean into human psychology, specifically something called the curiosity gap. You see, our brains absolutely despise incomplete information. When you hand your audience a puzzle but hold back that final piece, it creates real psychological tension. Your brain actually releases dopamine, which is essentially the pay attention chemical. This compels people to lean in and stick around to find the resolution. If you can open that gap, you absolutely own their attention. Okay, here's our quick roadmap for This Explainer. We'll hit 5 key stops. First, mastering the hook. Second, making your ideas stick. Third, storytelling and structuring. Fourth, building a sane business. And finally, surviving the hard things. Let's start right at the top of the funnel with Section 1, mastering the hook, and capturing attention in just 3 seconds. To pull this off, Pat Flynn has this awesome acronym, HOOKS. It's a step-by-step formula to break user patterns. H is for headline clarity. Basically, get straight to the point, no rambling. The first O is opening that curiosity gap we just talked about. The second O is offering contrast, so the difference between what they expect and what you actually deliver. K stands for kickstarting emotion, because, let's face it, people remember feelings way longer than raw facts. And S is show, don't just tell. Use vivid sensory language to immediately paint a picture in their head. To really see this in action, look at this contrast. A weak hook says something like, "Today I want to talk to you about productivity." Yawn, right? It's boring, expected, and asks literally nothing of the viewer. But a strong hook? If you're wasting 2 hours a day, this is why. Boom. It offers absolute clarity, raises the stakes, and instantly rips open that curiosity gap. You kind of have to know the answer. But here's the thing. A hook isn't just one sentence at the very beginning. Jeremy Enns outlines the 4 hooks framework. Think of this as a gauntlet your audience has to run. First, your title earns the click. Second, the description validates their choice. Third, the first minute of your actual content needs to immediately prove they made the right decision. And finally, if you're doing an interview, your very first question needs to skip the small talk and jump straight into the juicy, high-stakes stuff. All right, moving right along to Section 2, making your ideas stick. Because once you have their attention, you have to keep it for the next 10 minutes. You might have heard of the Made to Stick framework, which gives us the SUCCESS acronym. Psychologically sticky ideas usually share these traits. They're simple, distilling complex thoughts down to the core. They're unexpected, which keeps that curiosity going. They're concrete, appealing to the 5 senses instead of using abstract corporate jargon. They're credible, backed up by real authority. They're emotional, making the audience actually care. And finally, they are wrapped in a story. Run your concepts through this checklist and your message will definitely survive the distraction test. Now, to execute that final story element, Tim the podcast performance coach shares some brilliant neuro-backed tactics. One massive trick, the dramatic pause. It interrupts the rhythm and snaps the brain's attention right back. He's also a big fan of open loops, teasing an answer early on but delaying the actual payoff. And by using sensory language to create theater of the mind, you're triggering multiple parts of the listener's brain. Just remember the golden rule here. Make absolutely sure your story has a point. Which brings us to Section 3, storytelling and structuring, where we look at how to organize those thoughts and formats. The team at OBSBot breaks down how different script types serve completely different psychological goals. Doing a solo piece, your structure must map out the main points and transitions so you don't just ramble. Interviewing someone, the script is a guided map to keep your guest on track. Doing a narrative, you literally need to script out scene descriptions and rising action. Adding this kind of structure isn't restrictive at all. It actually frees you up so your pacing and those carefully crafted hooks land perfectly. Okay, let's pan the camera way back for Section 4, Building a Sane Business. Your content is just the front end, but what about the reality of the next 10 years? When it comes to the actual business engine behind a creator, Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hanson's book, Rework, is a game changer. They completely reject bloated planning. Their timeline is super simple. Start before you feel completely ready, ship a tiny, useful slice of your product to hit the absolute core of what people need, learn rapidly from how people actually use it, and then cut ruthlessly, trim the fluff, say no to distractions, and completely ignore vanity metrics. There's this massive contrast between toxic hustle culture and the rework reality. The growth myth screams at you to scale at all costs, pack your schedule with meetings, and hire a huge team. But the rework reality, it champions a calm, durable business. It puts actual profit over growth theater, action over endless planning, and async communication over constant interruptions. It teaches us that constraints, like not having enough time or money, are actually creative fuel. But here's the harsh truth. Even with the leanest, sanest business, you are still going to face some brutal crises. And that leads us to Section 5, Surviving the Hard Things, the unfiltered reality of leadership. Ben Horowitz hits the nail on the head in The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Most business advice is all about how to avoid screwing up. But guess what? You will screw up. The hard thing isn't setting a big, audacious goal. The hard thing is laying people off when you miss that goal. There's no magical formula for navigating the terrifying, ever-changing nightmares that pop up when you're making irreversible decisions for a company. This requires a massive reframe around fear. Horowitz points out that feeling sheer terror doesn't mean you're gutless. As a leader, you're gonna be scared. The true test isn't a lack of fear. It's pushing through that fear to make brutal decisions when things look absolutely dire. You have to separate perception from reality and find a way out when everyone else in the room is panicking. When Horowitz had to navigate massive layoffs, his mentor Bill Campbell gave him some incredibly sobering advice. In a crisis, true leadership demands immediate, brutal honesty. You have to ditch the toxic positivity. Putting on a fake sunny smile when the ship is sinking destroys trust faster than anything else. Your team needs to know exactly where they stand right now. Showing up and speaking the truth is the only way to keep the respect of the folks who are staying. It really comes down to stripping away the glamorous myth of being a CEO or a top-tier creator. The myth says you're this celebrated visionary, always basking in launch hype and unbroken positivity. But the hard thing, the real, gritty reality, means firing people you genuinely like, managing your own psychological terror, and telling the absolute truth when your back is against the wall. That is what actually builds a legacy that lasts. So, as we wrap things up today, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative question. When you look at everything from crafting that very first 6-second hook, to structuring their stories, to facing those terrifying 2 a.m. leadership nightmares, ask yourself, are you building your platform for the fragile ego of digital hype, or are you building it for the lasting impact of a resilient, honest reality? Take a moment to really think about that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and we'll see you in the next one.